I have been so drunk out of my mind that I could barely see straight because it was the only way I could cope with what I read in the Epstein files.
I haven't had a drink in 3 years. I was a bad alcoholic, the kind that doesn't just have a problem, but becomes the problem. And getting sober was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I want you to know that, so you understand what I'm about to tell you, which is that over the last 6 days, I have been so drunk out of my mind that I could barely see straight, because it was the only way I could cope with what I read in the Epstein files. I bought a bottle of whiskey. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a short vacation from reality, before I sat down to write this article, and I finished every drop of it. 6 days of oblivion just to process what I was reading on my phone over the weekend. I got it out of my system. But I knew going into this piece that it would absolutely wreck my mental health by the time I finished writing it, and I was right. Do not read this article if you are overly sensitive, because what follows will not leave your head for a very long time, and I am not going to soften any of it for you. Do not read this article if you think God and Jesus Christ are mythical fairy tales and the devil is some boogeyman that parents invented to scare kids into behaving, because the Epstein leaks prove beyond any reasonable doubt that anyone who does not believe in the reality of God and the devil is an idiot. I say that with love, and I say it bluntly because the time for tiptoeing is over. What is in these files is ritual child rape, child sacrifice, and black magic practiced at the highest levels of global power, exactly as it was practiced in ancient Babylon, exactly as the Bible describes it, and exactly as every so-called conspiracy theorist has been screaming about for decades, while the rest of the world called them crazy. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're an atheist, a Christian, a libertarian, or whatever tribe you've sorted yourself into so you can feel like you belong to something. None of that matters right now. What matters is that you read every word of this article, you share it with every single person you know, and you wake the hell up to what is actually happening in the world you live in, because you do not have the luxury of ignorance anymore. The emails that should have ended civilization as we know it. 3.5 million pages of Jeffrey Epstein's emails, financial records, FBI tips, and private correspondence just got dumped into the public record. This is not the same recycled flight logs and blurry photos we've been picking through for years. This batch makes everything that came before it look like a teaser trailer. Let's start with the stuff that is simply sitting right there in the documents, verified, in writing, from Epstein's own correspondence and the correspondence of the people around him. Someone emailed Jeffrey Epstein and wrote, "I decided to sacrifice poor homosexuals." Just like that, in plain English, the way you or I might email someone about picking up groceries. There is correspondence discussing what they call a classic stage 3, which they define as a young girl who was sexually traumatized as a small child and is now gradually developing special and supernatural abilities as a result of the abuse. Let me translate that out of their clinical language for you. They were raping children young enough that the trauma shattered their minds, and they had a classification system for the stages of psychological destruction, because they believed that breaking a child's psyche through sexual torture unlocked abilities they could exploit. They had a name for it. They had stages. This was systematized. There is an email from Epstein himself that says, "Where are you? Are you okay? Loved the torture video." There is a photograph of Prince Andrew literally hovering over a child on the floor. A woman sent Epstein a photograph of her baby, thanking him for his unbelievable generosity after an enormous sum appeared in her bank account, a number she said she had never seen before. Let me spell out what that means, since nobody else seems willing to. A mother sold her infant child to a known pedophile and child sex trafficker for sexual abuse. That baby was not purchased for adoption. That baby was purchased by a man who ran a global child rape network. A woman took a payment, sent a photo of the product, and thanked the buyer. That is what is sitting in these files right now. So the next time you hear some cable news ghoul or podcast influencer describe this as a scandal involving barely legal women, You remember that a mother sold her baby to a pedophile to be raped and sent a thank you note for the wire transfer. And then you decide for yourself whether Barely Legal Women remotely covers the scope of what was happening here. Harvard professor Martin Nowak emailed Ghislaine Maxwell after visiting to thank her for the hospitality, and then, completely unprompted, added, "I'm so happy I didn't kill anybody." When was killing on the table, Martin? What kind of visit are you attending where murder is a realistic enough outcome that you express relief about not doing it afterward? A baby was sold to a pedophile for sex. A Harvard professor is relieved he didn't murder someone at a dinner party. Someone is discussing the ritual sacrifice of human beings over email, the way you discuss weekend plans. And the entire media establishment is stepping around all of it, while the national conversation somehow remains stuck on whether this is a partisan issue.
900 pizzas and the FBI's own playbook.
The word pizza appears over 900 times in Epstein's emails, which would be a bizarre dietary obsession for anyone, let alone a convicted child sex trafficker who spent most of his time on private islands and in Manhattan townhouses. The reason this matters, for anyone who still thinks Pizzagate was just an unhinged Reddit theory, is that the FBI has maintained for years a documented glossary of coded language used by predator networks. Hot dog means boy. Pizza means girl. Cheese means little girl. Pasta means little boy. Ice cream means male prostitute. Map means semen. This is the FBI's own intelligence, compiled from their own investigations into trafficking rings, and it maps almost perfectly onto the language patterns saturating Epstein's correspondence. 900 references. Remember when acknowledging any of this publicly would get you banned from every platform on the internet and labeled a dangerous conspiracy theorist. Turns out the conspiracy theorists were just reading ahead. Baal, black magic, and the question nobody wants to ask. Here is where most people tap out, and I need you not to, because this is the part that actually matters most. Jeffrey Epstein had a bank account named Baal. No, seriously, you need to read that again. For anyone unfamiliar, Baal is the ancient Canaanite deity to whom children were sacrificed by fire in exchange for spiritual power, a practice documented extensively in the Bible, in archaeology, and in the historical records of virtually every civilization that encountered it. The pillars inside Epstein's temple on Little St. James Island are near-exact replicas of Solomon's temple pillars, which places them squarely in the lineage of ancient occult architecture and ritual magic going back thousands of years. This was not decoration. This was not some eccentric billionaire's quirky aesthetic. This was a man who named his money after a child-eating god and built a replica temple on the island where he trafficked children. And if you cannot connect those dots, then I genuinely do not know what to tell you. The standard response from the skeptical crowd is always some version of, well, I don't believe in magic, so it doesn't matter what they believe. And I understand that impulse, I really do, because confronting the alternative is terrifying. But the alternative is what's actually happening. It does not matter one bit whether you believe in the spiritual mechanics of child sacrifice. What matters is that the most powerful people on the planet believe in it fervently enough to build temples, name bank accounts, write emails about sacrifice, and organize global trafficking networks around the practice of it. Your disbelief does not make them stop. Your skepticism does not protect a single child. And your refusal to engage with the occult dimensions of this, because they make you uncomfortable or because they conflict with your materialist worldview, is doing exactly what these people need you to do, which is look away from the thing that explains everything else. Why does every investigation into elite trafficking eventually crash into a wall of pentagrams and ancient Babylonian religion and ritual sacrifice? Why does it keep happening? Why does Jeffrey Epstein visibly flinch and scramble to change the subject when Steve Bannon brings up Jesus Christ in a recorded conversation, dismissing him as just a carpenter and practically lunging for the next topic? The Bible has quite a bit to say about how dark forces react to that name, and you can watch it play out in real time on camera. Every single rabbit hole, In the interconnected world of elite finance, intelligence, trafficking, and entertainment terminates at the same destination, which is the organized worship of entities that Scripture identifies as enemies of God. If that's all just coincidence and theater, it's the most expensive and elaborate theater operation in human history. And these are not people known for wasting money. Bill Gates, Harvard scientists, and the people you were told to trust. The emails allege that Bill Gates caught a sexually transmitted disease from Russian girls connected to Epstein's network, and then begged Epstein for a secret antibiotic so he could dose his wife Melinda without her knowledge. Read that as slowly as you need to. Bill Gates was allegedly raping trafficked girls, caught a disease from doing it, and then wanted to secretly drug his own wife with antibiotics so she wouldn't find out he'd infected her. This is the man the entire world was told to trust with vaccines. This is the man governments deferred to during a global pandemic. This is the man who was allowed to shape public health policy affecting billions of people, while he was allegedly so comfortable abusing the medical system that he'd covertly medicate his own wife to cover up his sex crimes. Melinda divorced him in 2021 and specifically cited the Epstein relationship. When a reporter recently asked her about the allegation that he drugged her, she didn't deny it. She said, "Sad, just unbelievable sadness," and left it there. She could have simply said that's not true. On the subject of Harvard, because that institution comes up with alarming frequency in these files, there is an email from scientist Robert Trivers to Epstein that casually discusses the sexual economics of transitioning children. It breaks down male to female versus female to male transsexuals in the language of a commodity trader analyzing market segments, discusses how trans women easily make money through prostitution, and then concludes with the observation that, by the way, we are now pushing this intervention earlier. So, notice your 3-year-old son has trans tendencies, so now you intervene with hormones. I would be frightened to do that, but who knows? This is a Harvard scientist discussing hormonal experimentation on toddlers in a private email to a child sex trafficker in 2018, while the broader culture was being told that anyone questioning the rapid medicalization of gender-confused children was a bigot. The architects were literally emailing pedophiles about it. Nicki Minaj posted as the files were dropping that your favorite artists have been practicing rituals in a satanic cult where they take babies from other countries and mutilate them and kill them as a form of blood sacrifice to their god. Strong words from a woman whose entire visual catalog is drenched in occult symbolism, who built a career on imagery that got her accused of witchcraft multiple times, and who is now conveniently positioning herself as an outsider blowing the whistle on a system she spent decades swimming in.
This is how the game works. One of them gets exposed, and the rest rush to the microphone to point the finger, because the best way to avoid being implicated is to be the one doing the implying. Every celebrity who suddenly has a lot to say about Epstein right now should be getting more scrutiny, not less.
Who these people actually are. Epstein stated outright that the idea that every life is equal is Catholicism at its worst. The word goyim appears hundreds of times across the communications. There is persistent disparagement of Christian beliefs and open supremacist rhetoric about the chosen people running through the correspondence between Epstein and his inner circle. And pretending that isn't in the documents because it's an uncomfortable thing to acknowledge is intellectual dishonesty of the highest order. That said, anyone trying to reduce this to a single nation intelligence operation is also not reading the files honestly, because there is a photograph of Epstein in a room surrounded by boxes literally labeled CIA. There are Russian intelligence connections, and there are UK connections. This was a multinational blackmail and trafficking enterprise with protection from multiple governments and spy agencies simultaneously. And the supremacist ideology was one thread in a much larger and uglier tapestry. The point is not to assign blame to one group. The point is that these people believed they were fundamentally superior to the rest of humanity, and that belief is what gave them permission to do what they did. And what they did, if you believe even a fraction of what the FBI collected from victims brave enough to come forward, goes further than most people are willing to follow. The files include a batch of FBI tips and accusations technically labeled unverified, sourced from anonymous tipsters and individuals the Bureau deemed not credible or emotionally unstable. Though it's worth asking how emotionally stable you'd expect a victim of ritualized child abuse to be when they finally walk into an FBI field office to tell someone what happened to them. George H.W. Bush is alleged to have raped a male victim who also described being subjected to a ritual sacrifice where his feet were cut off with a sword. The same victim says he witnessed a child being ripped apart on a yacht, their intestines pulled out of their body while people watched. Both Bushes were admitted members of Skull and Bones, a secret society whose rituals include ejaculating into coffins, which is not conspiracy, but publicly admitted fact. And if your rituals already involve jerking off into coffins, then tell me exactly how many steps removed you think that is from what this victim described. Ron DeSantis faces an accusation of raping a man in Florida in 2008. Joe Biden appears multiple times, named as a perpetrator in the sexual abuse of children as young as 10 years old, with emails describing trips within Epstein's circle that included the Clintons and the Bidens. Donald Trump is alleged to have forced a 13-year-old girl to perform oral sex on him and then hit her when she bit him, though the FBI deemed the source not credible after finding a history of mandatory psychiatric evaluations. None of this is verified. Some of it may be fabricated. But I want you to sit with something for a second before you dismiss any of it. Given what is verified in the other 3.5 million pages, given that we are staring at baby sales and torture video fan mail, and bank accounts named after child-eating deities, and Harvard professors relieved they didn't murder anyone at dinner, is any accusation really that unbelievable anymore? The reason these people get away with what they do is that they operate so far beyond the boundaries of what normal humans can conceive of, that your inability to believe it is the security system. You hear about a child being torn apart on a yacht, and your brain says, no, that can't be real, and that rejection is not a flaw in you. That reaction is the entire design. Do something so monstrous that no reasonable person would believe another human being is capable of it, and you've built yourself a fortress made out of everyone else's decency. And if you zoom out far enough to see the full picture, the math gets very uncomfortable very quickly. If you are extraordinarily wealthy and extraordinarily powerful, the probability that you are compromised by or complicit in networks like this is not some fringe speculation anymore. These are the most strategically intelligent people alive. They built fortunes larger than the GDP of most nations. They did not get there by being naive, and they do not maintain their power by being squeamish. Every civilization that came before ours talked openly about the dark side of the spiritual world, about ritual, about forces that operate just outside of what most people can perceive. We are the first people in recorded history to collectively decide that none of it is real, and we made that decision at the exact historical moment when the people practicing it needed us to stop paying attention. That is not a coincidence. 3.5 million pages of evidence say the ancients were right about all of it. And there is a reason these networks don't blaspheme Muhammad. There is a reason they don't target Buddha. There is a reason they name their bank accounts after Baal and worship Satan and build temples modeled on ancient sorcery and physically recoil when someone says the name of Jesus Christ in their presence. Whatever these people are running from, with this much money and this much effort, it's probably worth running toward. Evil wins when good people do nothing. The files are out. The evidence exists. 3.5 million pages of it. Children were trafficked, sold, tortured, and sacrificed by people who run the institutions you interact with every single day. And most people are going to skim a headline about it, feel a momentary pang of something they'll choose not to name, and go back to whatever they were doing before. That is how evil wins. Not through some climactic battle where the bad guys show up wearing black hats and the good guys ride in to stop them. Evil wins through the accumulated weight of millions of decent people choosing comfort over truth, one ordinary day at a time, until the silence becomes so thick and so normal that breaking it feels like the crazy thing to do. Your silence is their favorite weapon. Your disbelief is the only wall they need. Every single day that passes without accountability, without outrage, without people demanding answers in a voice loud enough to be inconvenient, is another day these networks operate freely, and another day a child somewhere pays for our collective cowardice with their body and their life. Good people have been doing nothing about this for far too long, and the cost of that nothing is measured in children. Whatever standing up looks like for you, whether it's sharing the truth, supporting independent journalism, raising your kids with open eyes, or simply refusing to look away when everyone around you does, the time for sitting on the sideline is over. Get off the bench. Editorial note: Lily wasn't around to proofread and edit this one, so I apologize if it's not quite up to our usual standard. I'm hungover, I'm depressed, I have a migraine that won't quit, and I'm genuinely starting to grapple with the possibility that our world is run by demons, which is not a sentence I ever expected to write and mean literally. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that, and I imagine some of you are too. If you want to see better content and more of it, become a paid subscriber. I need to pay Lily more money, or she's going to move to LA and take a job at some Hollywood celebrity gossip rag that can afford to pay her more than I've made in the last 5 years combined. And I wouldn't even blame her. I need help keeping this little newsletter running. I need new equipment. I need the basic things that any small independent news publication needs to survive and keep doing the work that mainstream outlets refuse to do. If you can help, please do. If you can't, share this article with everyone you know. That costs nothing, and it matters more than you think.